Yes. Okay, great. So welcome everyone to today's session, December 14th, and it's the last session of the year. Thank you to all who have been here since the beginning, and thank you for those stepping in for the first time. Can I just get a quick raise of hands of who was here last time with Meg? Just with your actual hand now. Okay, a few of you, exactly, great. Good, so I might just start with a quick session, like a quick moment for everyone to check in and kind of share how they felt that session went, whether you've applied it to teaching with children or if you've had any inspiration since. And exactly, so I'm just going to open up the space to do that. And then I will move into forest education. I took a course, so I'll share a little bit about that. And also I'm doing the Montessori teacher training, and there's a piece that I'd like to share with you because I think it ties in quite nicely with permaculture, okay? So I'll just do a quick stop share so that we can see everyone speaking. If anybody wants to share how they felt Meg's session was, and yeah, give you a few minutes, a few seconds. Stacey, I think, has raised her hand.
Hi. I was actually on the road to Queensland when Meg was talking, as she was talking about being from the Central Coast. I was driving past the Central Coast. And I did have trouble, so I'm going to have to re-listen to it, but to listen to the recording. But I think the main thing that I got from the lovely Meg was her idea of just taking children into the wild, like not trying to meet, you know, I suppose KPIs, that kind of thing, just teaching them from the ground up, basically, rather than meeting scores, things that you can tick off in a box. So that just started my mind ticking over as I was driving along and looking at the beautiful countryside. Was just that it is really simple. You just take them by the hand and take them into the wild and observe and start from there.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I got that as well. It's just very organic and natural, her way of teaching, and it's just really working with what's present in the child and also in nature around her. Thank you, Stacey. Fleur, go ahead.
Hi, sorry. Rushing like usual. Yeah, I felt, because I work with the school up the road, which is the school is a public school, so there's not a lot of money, and everything she was saying is pretty much what we have to do with those kids there. There's a lot of behavior issues where kids are not really conforming to the normal norm of school. And does any kid conform to the normal school? And yeah, just what she was saying is pretty much what I've been trying to work with these kids. The simple thing was, one time they were all a bit rowdy, and I just literally took them into an area where there was just trees, and they were just picking up the leaves for me for the composting and sticks, and they were thrilled with just doing the simplest things. And ever since then, they keep on saying, do you need more sticks? Do you need more leaves for my composting? And even encouraged them to collect the food scraps, and they were filling up the worm farms. Granted, they filled up one worm farm with a whole heap of weeds. I don't know where they got them from. Like, literally the whole bucket was full of weeds. But the worms survived, so that was good. But yeah, so I felt it was very similar to what I'm doing, like trying to achieve with these kids at the school.
That's great. Thank you, Fleur. Yeah, if you involve kids, they're just, and it's like comes from their own initiative, then they're just really hooked from the beginning. That's why growing vegetables with them and having them eat that, it's just a whole different experience. Great, thank you. Caitlin, go ahead.
Hi everyone. I found that session super inspiring. It showed me how much I have to unlearn. You know, this like feeling like there needs to be a plan and there needs to be step by step. And if you don't know everything, you can't possibly start teaching. Whereas Meg was kind of like, yes, you can, as long as you know more than the person that you're talking to. Like, off you go, obviously with like a good heart and good intent, and don't do damage by teaching stuff that is completely untrue. But also just the way that she made it like really fun and inspired me to like have more fun with it and be more creative. And also the simplifying down the principles. I thought that was really, really, really useful, to be able to sort of discuss permaculture with people that are not familiar with it. So yeah, great session. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Caitlin. Yeah, the five finger thing is how I first found out about Meg. I think Stacey actually posted it last year in another children's group that we started. And I just think that's such a great way to teach the principles, because they can be quite dense, even for adults, of course. And so just having your hand as a teaching tool and as a learning tool and as a tool to remember them and write. And then the idea that the ethics are in the palm of your hand and they inform every decision that you're making. And also the hand movements. I'm super excited to try that with children. And if and when any of you do it, please share the feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so I think I'll go ahead and continue with my presentation, if I can find it. I don't know what's happened. Sorry, 1 second. I'm sorry, I seem to have closed the screen rather than just made it smaller. 1 second, sorry guys. Here it is. Okay. Sorry. I've been sick for the last few days, so I think my brain is just in slow mode right now. Apologies also if my voice crackles or anything throughout this. Okay, here we go. Can everyone see that? Yes, okay, great. So this was some of the images that I pulled from her website, from Meg's website. Here we go. Right, yeah, so the 5 principles on the left, 5 finger principle idea, and then she also mentioned this other illustration, which I think is a really great way to kind of plan lessons and kind of give your work and your teaching some structure. And so yeah, what I was particularly inspired about was the nature questions that she asked, which I posted immediately after the Zoom, this kind of place for us to share some questions that we could ask children in nature, and not just like, what's the name of this tree, or what is the name of the shape of this leaf? You know, those are very like scientific kind of in the box questions, but it's like, how can we widen their approach and their perspective on the forest? And so the first question that she asked was, who do you reckon looks after the forest? And I just found that like such a great way to kind of introduce that topic and kind of see it from a different perspective. So some of these questions I wrote down, and this is of course a working document, so I'll add things, and I encourage you to add things as well if you guys, you know, think of some by yourself or while you're with children. So this is a great place to share and get inspiration from. Yeah, so that inspired me to pick up the forest education piece that I did. I took a training here in Austria about 2 years ago, and the philosophy is based on somebody named Joseph Connell, and he is a naturist and an environmental educator. And his book here on the left is called Sharing Nature with Children, which is a really beautiful book. And then Coyote's Guide is by somebody named John Young. Unfortunately, I don't have this book myself, but I've heard really great things about him. And he takes the approach of calling it nature mentoring. So mentoring children in nature and mentoring the experience of being in nature, right? Which I think is a really beautiful way of putting it too. And then this is a great quote from Joseph Connell, which is, look at everything as though you are seeing it for the first time, with eyes of a child, fresh with wonder. And I think that's just a great reminder for us all, our busy brained adult minds, you know, just to sink into our bodies and sink into the experience and really just admire things with awe and with wonder, right? Because like if you share that with children, they're just going to immediately soak up your enthusiasm as well. And I think, you know, there's lots of guidelines about how to teach nature education in a forest, but honestly, it's just about conveying your enthusiasm for the forest and then taking them on that journey with you. So I think that's just like the most intuitive and most organic piece, like leave the curriculum in the classroom and really just see with what's happening outside in the elements and with the plants and with the seasons, you know, just like what's popping up, what leaves are falling, what mushrooms are popping up, which buds, which flowers, which berries, those kind of things. And then it says here on the cover of Coyote's Guide, a foreword by Richard Louv. And maybe some of you are familiar with this book. It was caused quite a ripple a few years ago it's called Last Child in the Woods. So it's about the idea of saving our children from nature deficit disorder. And I think there's a quote in the book. It's like, I like being inside, like from a child, like an 8-year-old child. I like being inside because that's where all the plug sockets are, right? For his gadgets. And so it's just like really reevaluating our relationship with that and taking children outside. And of course, like if they've been glued to a screen, it will take maybe a few more sessions than usual to get them inspired. But I think, you know, we all have an innate connection to nature and children grasp that pretty quickly. Okay. So yeah, so Joseph Cornell invented something or created something called flow learning. And there's 4 steps that kind of follow this model to make an experience in the forest with you and the children as like as successful as possible and as hands-on as possible and as sensorial as possible. So I'll just go through them. So awaken enthusiasm is the first step. So like I said, the piece about being just really inspired and really in awe with what's happening and just really awakening, you know, showing your enthusiasm will help awaken theirs. And like not to focus on like, this is a hemlock, this is a beech tree, but like just really focus in on like the experience, like how that hemlock tree makes you feel or how it's impacting another tree, you know, it's kind of telling a story around it and the relationships in the forest rather than reeling out scientific facts. Then the second is focusing attention, which is done mainly through something that they call seek and gather games or activities. And I'll share a few examples of that. It's really like focusing in on the natural materials that are around and kind of putting on like I always say that there's a difference between like the macro and the micro, right? So you're always trying to change that perspective. And the focus attention is of course going into the macro lens. It's like the eagle view, the macro, and then the micro is the ant view. So you're always trying to change that perspective so that they get a whole picture of the forest. And yeah, so focusing attention on that and just being really present with them and being receptive to their needs and what they're interested in. Like Montessori is all about following the child. So if a child's really interested in like this creek in the woods or like or something that they found, you know, focus your attention on that rather than being like, okay, well now we have to go do this because that's what's on the curriculum. Then the third one is offer direct experience. So that's mostly about playing group games and also allowing the child to have some free play. So really allowing the child to explore the forest by themselves. Of course, within a parameter, you know, you could set rules like make sure that you can always see me and those kind of things, and kind of echo the sounds of the forest. So like, of course, we don't want the children to be shouting, but there's also no need for them to be whispering in the forest because then the animals won't understand why these humans are suddenly whispering, right? Just to like speak in a regular voice, right? So yeah, there's activities and then games to offer direct experience. And then lastly, a share inspiration, which is done through a closing circle, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. And just to share how the experience was for people and what they learned and things. Okay, so yeah, these are some of the things to consider and remember when you're going out into a forest with children. So the seek and gather activities, like I mentioned earlier, really just focusing in on the natural materials around you and really discovering them, picking up a leaf, turning it around, seeing if there's what the veins are, what the shape is, having a look at mushrooms, that micro view. Then movement games. There's lots of different running games and activities that you can do with children in regards to the forest. Like there's a squirrel game and a hungry fox game, which I'll share a little bit later. And then awareness of the senses. So that's like so huge in a forest because, you know, in the classroom, I feel like the senses are kind of like subdued or numbed down. But if you're in the forest and there's just like this vast open space, or like you just feel that your oxygen levels almost change as well. And so if you remove one sense, let's say the eyes, if you do a blindfolded activity, then of course it heightens all the other ones. And that's a really special experience to like change that perspective as well. Also, if possible, I really love taking the children out for a while barefooted. You know, there's that theory of grounding and how important it is for our health. And it can really, a lot of children might be like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. But it can be a really beautiful experience for them. And it really just grounds them and connects them with Mother Nature in a way that just doing it with the eyes and with your shoes on isn't quite the same. So that's something I really recommend. And doing on a moss floor is, of course, the best way to do that. And then sharing forest and animal stories. So the best thing is to have some stories that you know off by heart, of like story of a squirrel, or the story of like why the leaves fall, and how the forest is protected by moss, and the moisture level, and those kind of things, like bringing in scientific facts through stories of like with characters of like the woodland animals and stuff. And then, yeah, so 3 foundational things: just appealing to their creativity, their fantasy and fascination. The children are fascinated. They're so excited to be in the forest. So really take that on board with you. Then it's all about building a relationship between humans and forest. I don't need to go into how we're disconnected from nature, and in the cities we all know that, but it's just like yeah, just really giving a space for them to just be, you know, like you can create a really great program and offer lots of things, but just being in the forest with free play is also really wonderful. Yeah, and then that moves on to the next point: give space for self-discovery and free play. So a child will find ways to discover what they want if you give them the space to. I love this. This quote is, "We are visitors of the forest. We come as grateful guests." That's what was taught to me in the forest education course. I just really love starting a forest tour like this, kind of like pretending that there's these big gates, these big imaginary gates, and before we open the gates, like setting some guidelines and just showing gratitude and appreciation and respect for the forest, that we're going to step into this space that's really sacred. And, you know, we're visitors, we're guests, so what are appropriate ways to be with the forest, and, you know, leave no trace, and find it better, leave it better than you found it, and those kind of things. Yeah, so we want to always be engaging the head, the heart, and the hands. So of course, bring in some scientific knowledge, but also really make sure that it's a heart connection, and allow the children to touch things. You know, I think that's really important. You could, like, you know, pick up pine cones and those kind of things, but we can also move heavy logs. If you want to create like a seating area, you can get them to move heavy logs and put them into a circle. The kids love doing that, and just kind of creating like little nooks and little like camp spots for you to have your lessons. Children really like that. Changing locations within the forest, I think, is really important after each activity. It kind of, if you change the perspective of where you are, it really gives the next activity this whole new other magic. It seems really simple, but when I did that, I was like, wow, this is really impactful, rather than just standing in one place for 4 hours. Of course, it depends how much time you have, but if you do have a whole day, like move to different places in the forest. Like for a big game, like find an open space. For something where it's more like a little gathering activity, find a little nook. It really makes a big difference. And then, yeah, shorter sequences work best. So don't allow things to run over time, you know. And then variety is a recipe for success. So just focus in on giving a good range of different types of activities. Oh yeah, and then I have a great idea on how to create groups or partners, especially like if you know you need to have certain kids together or certain kids not together. So you would get a bag and put in like 2 pine cones, 2 leaves, 2 sticks, 2 rocks, 2 pieces of moss, those kind of things. And then always 2 of each, or 3, depending on how big you want the group to be. And then each child will take a object from the bag. And then once all the objects have been given out, it's like all the pine cones are one group, all the kids with the leaves are in another group. And yeah, it's just nice to mix up partner groups, I think, sometimes too, and it's kind of fun. Then they can be the pine cone group for the rest of the day, or then they're the leaf group, and then they create a little story around that. They love those kind of things. And if you need to change the order of a line, you know, if they're all in a line, then you can kind of use that tool as well. Daniela, are you raising your hand?
Yes, I am. How big are your groups normally, and what do you think is a good group? What is too many?
That's a good
So-
question. So right now I'm working in a Montessori school, and we have like 20 kids with 2 teachers. I think, you know, the ratio is generally 10 kids per teacher. But of course, if you can go smaller, that's great. And if you go bigger, then of course you probably just need another adult. It really depends on like licensing and like legal stuff in your country, right? But yeah. And also if you have like a big group, you can turn it into smaller groups and kind of work with that. Does that answer your question? Yeah, okay, thanks. Okay, so this is kind of the rhythm of the session. So you start with an opening circle. You welcome the children to the forest. You set those guidelines. You can do that. The gate, the Mandarin gate that I just mentioned. You can do a name round if you happen to be working with kids that are like coming from a different school or something, or you don't know them. You can do a name round. Then this is the moment where you want to awaken enthusiasm and instill wonder and fascination. Then you do a seek and gather activity. And then focusing in on their senses and focusing in on their attention. So these are just the points that I've obviously raised already, but this is kind of like the flow of the order of how you should do it. And then could do it. And then I just think it's best to do like a small, like light, like low energy, or like the seek and gather game before a movement game, but you can kind of like switch it around and feel into the energy, right? They will tell you what they need. And then yeah, movement games, offering direct experience, free play, partner games, group games, those kind of things. Storytelling, you can do that while they eat lunch maybe, or before. It's always nice to start an activity by introducing it through a story. You know, I'll tell you in a minute about this game called the Color Wheel, and it's all about gathering different types. I'll mention it later. No, well, I can mention it now. It says here, so basically you can tell a story of why the trees lose their leaves, right? And then the next activity would be something called the Color Wheel. So this is a great activity to do in the fall when the leaves are on the ground, and basically you go around and you get the children to collect lots of different types of natural materials in different colors. And then you get them to come back together, and then you create a nature mandala with them all together. And we did it actually in silence. And you just got you had one teacher stand by the mandala and kind of guide them where to put it. And doing it in silence was super powerful. It's just such a beautiful activity. Yeah, and then you have a closing circle. I think opening and closing circles are really important. It just kind of like puts the experience in like this capsule that's really special, and it's just a ceremonial aspect to it. And I think it's really beautiful to have opening and closing circles. And then this is a time where it can be a reflection round. So the children using a talking stick. For those who aren't familiar with talking sticks, basically the person who's holding a talking stick can share their experience and in an uninterrupted way, so nobody can speak during that. The person who holds the stick is the person who can speak, and then it gets moved on to the next person, so that it's not a dialogue, it's just they share their experience, and it's like open listening, and then it moves on to the next person. And that's also a great skill for children to learn, right? Not to like interrupt and interject, but to really just active listening, right? And to hold space for the people's experience, right? That'll change depending on how old they are, but children are really receptive to that. Exactly. So just sharing inspiration on how the experience was for you, what the children particularly liked. It's really beautiful if you yourself share the experience and kind of go over things that touched you or that you were really pleased happened, and those kind of things. And then if you're musically inclined, you could finish with a song. And then I think carrying the energy of the forest with you, that will depend on how the day is for you. You know, like you could go leave the forest like in a line very quietly, or you could like sing as you exit the forest, or it just depends. You just want to reflect the energy of the day in the way that you're leaving the forest. And then you can have those gates again, the imaginary gates, and like closing them and showing gratitude for the forest. So these are some examples. I've been talking about like the method and the philosophy, but these are direct examples of activities. So here up on the right, we see the color wheel, right? So those are all the different types of plants that people gathered. And then the forest treasure is something I like to do at the very beginning of a session. So basically I tell the children that they're guests of the forest, and that they can wander around and find something that fits in the palm of their hand, and that they felt really cool to pick up, like something really beautiful or something unique or unusual that they've never seen before. And then they come back to the circle, and everybody goes around and shares what they have in their hand and why they picked it up. And then it's good if you bring a rug, like a rug with no pattern on it, right? So like a dark green rug or a dark brown rug. And then the children will put all their different materials on it. And then it's kind of like this guessing game. You will ask them to turn around and look up at the forest, and changing the perspective of looking up at the forest after they've just been facing the floor for so long is really, really an impactful experience. And then you're like, what do you see up in the trees, and that kind of thing. And then you will take off a few of the objects, and then you'll ask them to turn around and see if they could spot which objects have been taken. And children really love this game. And then you can allow them to take turns to like, okay, like John, you can take 4 objects, and then while he does that, everyone else turns around. And then you could also get another blanket and put it over all the materials and be like, okay, how many things were made out of wood? How many pine cones were there? How many things were green? How many things were slippery or something like that? So it's just really engaging the senses and their memory as well. Then find your tree is a really beautiful activity, which is in the second picture here, in the main picture. So you get the children to partner up, and one of them is blindfolded and the other one is the seeing person. And the seeing person picks a tree without telling the blind person, and they guide the blind person to that tree. And you can do it where it's like you create sounds for like go or stop, or you can just use your words as well. And sometimes it's really great doing it in silence, but that's up to the age group and the children. And then they would guide the child to the tree, like not super direct, kind of like in a meandering pattern. And then they'd ask the child to touch the tree. So from the bottom, like feeling all the moss at the bottom and feeling where the moss is on one side of the tree or not, finding where the branches are, where do they start, lower, higher, are there rocks around the tree, are there leaves around the tree, what's the feeling, what's the bark like, right? And then still, this is also blindfolded, then they get guided back to the starting point, and then the child can take off their blindfold and guess which tree is theirs. And it's a really beautiful experience. It's really, the children will always be like, that's my tree, throughout the whole forest session. Exactly. The color wheel I already mentioned, and then life as a squirrel. So you could like tell the story of like how a squirrel lives in the forest, what they need to eat, what the activities, like what their daily rhythm is like, and those kind of things. And like you can bring in really interesting facts about squirrels, like most of the trees in the world are forgotten acorns from squirrels and those kind of things. And then you could even create like a shelter, like a little squirrel shelter with the children in the end. So just, bringing the factual and then bringing in a direct experience and kind of bringing in the fantasy as well. So that's kind of the three best ingredients for a forest activity. And then the window view and mirror to the sky. So I really like changing perspective in the forest. So when the children come into the forest, you could get them to go like this. And then it seems so simple, but it really changes the perspective of your experience if you do that in a forest, even as an adult. And then mirror to the sky. So there's me holding a mirror. And I was like a little child when the teacher showed me this. I was just like so mesmerized by this experience that I could suddenly see the branches above me, and I didn't have to like crick my head up. And I was just like wandering around looking into this mirror and seeing all the leaves and the branches and the sky. And it's a really cool experience. So perspective change is really powerful. And so this is the group games. So you could start each activity actually with something called Who Am I? So it's a guessing game on animals. So you can start with like, I have a bushy tail, and those kind of things. Like I gather nuts, and you can make it more complex, and you can get the children to create, to be the one saying the sentences, and then the other children guess. Then Hungry Fox, and this guessing game, like you can say who am I, and then the answer is a fox, right? And then you would introduce the fox game, or then you're a bat in your guessing game, and then you would introduce the bat game. So the Hungry Fox is this game where you put down a line of logs as the squirrel base, and then you have the fox base. And the squirrels are trying to get the nuts in front of the fox without being caught. And the fox has his back to the squirrels, and then the squirrels can run really quickly and quietly to the fox's den. And then the fox will turn around and be like, I am hungry. And any child that's moving in that time, like they will, like if the fox catches them, then they will have to go back to the squirrel base. And then the intention is to get the acorn. And then you can, once the acorn is caught, you can change the dynamic where it then becomes a group dynamic where the whole group is trying to bring the acorn back to the base, by like passing it to each other with the behind their backs, right? So then the fox has to guess who has the nut, and if he guesses correctly, then the game starts over. And if he guesses incorrectly, then they continue, and then they can hopefully bring it back to the base. So it's fun to change like the different perspectives or different dynamics of the game. Then there's also something called bat and moth, which is, so bats have this they don't have the same, they don't have a like, they don't use their eyes to catch their prey. They use this echolocation, and basically when they make a sound, it echoes, and then they can understand where their prey is. And so you create a group, a circle with all the kids, and then you pick one child to be a bat, and then there's a few that are moths, and they're all blindfolded, and basically you get the children to get 2 stones, and the bat will go click click with the stones, click click with the stones, and then the moths will try and avoid them, and they have to always click back to each other, so then the bat can get the prey. So, and then you get the other children to hold space for that, and you just rotate into it. I'm a bit conscious of the time, so I will write down the rest of these, how to play these, and then we can just post them in the Hive group. This last one I will mention is truth or false. So any you have like a row of kids called the owls, and then the ravens, and they have to, if you say a statement about something that you've learned, like evergreen trees lose their leaves, and then you get them to run to the true or the truth or the false line, depending on if that statement is true or false. So that's a really fun game as well for them. Yeah, and then this is something that I did here in Austria actually a few weeks ago with the children. It's like the salty dough, and you can just create like tree faces. So the children take their dough and push them on the trunks, sorry, and then they can create some tree faces. Okay, I'm going to take a moment to breathe, and I will just give this space to people if they have any questions or comments. Anybody? Daniela, 1 second.
Those were really, really inspiring. And my kids went to a Montessori kindergarten and now Montessori school. So they had forest days in kindergarten and did lots of that stuff, and really liked it as well. I just went to my local library and just got all the books I could find about forest and stuff. So I'd like to show you some.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, this is Der Mann, der Bäume pflanzte, the man who planted trees. It's also been animated, an award-winning short film you can find on YouTube. It's about a shepherd who planted a whole forest. Well, really, really nice and impactful story. And my kids, we just watched the movie or the film the other day. They said, well, now I know one single person can change things.
Oh, that's great.
So that's a really nice one. And this one is So wächst ein Wald. The original is from an English one. This is how, Who Makes a Forest? Yeah, Who Makes a Forest? And it basically explains from from a stone area to a forest, what has to happen. So you start with moss and lichen, I think, and then grasses and stuff. And it's really nice pictures, and it's just explained. In the beginning, it asks who makes a forest. Is it an emperor with a huge army, or is it by magic? And then it explains how it goes. So it's a really nice one that I found.
That's great. Thank you so much. That book kind of answers the very first question that Meg asked, like who takes care of the forest, right? Like how did the forest appear?
Yeah.
And That's really great. Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing those books. And if anybody has any books or any resources they'd like to share during Zooms, I highly welcome that. That would be great. There's a book called The Tree Lady, which is a true story about a woman named Kate Sessions. And she lived in she lived in Northern California by the redwood trees, so the biggest trees in the world. And that was like her playground as a child. And then she moved to San Diego for work. This was like in the 40s, I think, maybe a bit earlier. And no, she died in the 40s, so it was a bit before that. And she basically created a huge tree oasis, like a huge forest, like a huge park in San Diego, which was like a complete desert at that time, and really transformed a whole city. And it's yeah, it's a really beautiful book, really well illustrated, and it's just, I love telling true stories about environmental activists. So I can also post a list of that. I have a lot of references and resources, and I just think it's really important. Like Montessori is all about focusing on like the unsung heroes. So, you know, like telling the stories of like lesser known people as well. Yeah. Fleur, I think I see you very excitedly holding a book. It's like show and tell right now. It's great.
This is from England. It's from where my mum lived. She brought it over when she last went to England, which was many years. Well, one of the times she went to England, and yeah, all my children have read it, and now my son is reading it. And it's called A Year in Percy's Park. And it was just a lovely little book. And yeah, he reads a page or two each day. And yeah, it's just a nice little book. So I just thought that's a nice one for the kids. And it's from England, it's not from Australia. So yeah.
Great.
It's just a nice little gardening sort of book. It's all about nature, gardening and saving the forests. And yeah, it's just a nice little book. So yeah, just sort of show you. But what I was interested in is I didn't know that because lived in Australia my whole life, except for going overseas for a little bit, I didn't know that squirrels don't just eat nuts. I thought they just eat nuts. I didn't realize they eat moths and things like that. So you've really inspired me.
Great. Good. Anybody else want to share? Any questions? No.
I'll say something, Ange.
Yes, go ahead. Hi, Greg.
Yeah, I guess my experience comes from a more practical approach. We've worked in Asia a lot, so we had the advantage of a lot of forest around us. We take the kids on 1 week residentials where they trek through the forest and experience the forest. Going to the Green School in Bali, which is a school made of bamboo. That was a cool experience.
Amazing. That's like my dream school.
Yeah, but we take the kids trekking through Kauai National Park and you know, walking along a mud track and seeing a tiger footprint really brings you to a point where you understand how vulnerable you are in the forest. But at Millen Farm in Brisbane, which is where we are now, we're trying to introduce Permakids, which is education for kids. So we have our homeschool groups attend on Fridays, and we're teaching them through the education garden about edible weeds, medicinal herbs. We have a sensory garden and all those sorts of things. So when they're working in the gardens, they can actually pick produce and snack on it while they're working. So it's a really nice environment for them to learn in that respect.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing, Greg. The edible weeds and stuff, that aspect is really, really exciting. I hope to dive more into that and kind of move into like herbalism or apothecary and stuff. And yeah, just that's more like also the nature survival, the wilderness survival aspect too, you know, with like building a fire in the forest, or like you know, carving and things, and creating shelters. So yeah, I mean, the forest is like nature's classroom, right? There's so many different activities.
And I did a course in the Philippines in jungle survival with the US Navy,
Amazing.
And we learned how to use bamboo to make pressure cookers and utensils, traps. And that's something I'm also imparting at Mill and Farm. And the kids are finding it just amazing what you can do with a bit of bamboo.
Yeah, that's
Simple things like that.
great. Thank you so much for sharing. If maybe if you'd ever like to share that in a session, I think there's lots of interest. I see lots of nodding heads already.
Yeah, right.
If you're comfortable with that, I'll shoot you an email.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Greg. That's so exciting. Okay. Anybody else? All
I'm
right.
just in the chat, and Dell has mentioned that the presentation has inspired them to think about permaculture clubs in schools, and
Mhm.
this could be part of or independent from other clubs like Environment Club, Wildlife Clubs, etc.
Yeah, great. Like the permaculture scouts. That's great. Cool. Really good idea. Like an after school club or something, or yeah, there's lots of exciting ways to do this, or like going on camp trips or something. Yeah. Great.
I
Just
have
another thing.
sorry,
No,
Greg.
Greg and then Daniela.
You're right. One of the things that's becoming very popular now around Brisbane, and I'm sure it's many other areas, is urban agriculture in schools. So we're participating in a lot of school groups where we're setting up school farms where kids can grow food for people in need. So we're donating to Meals on Wheels and things like that.
Amazing. That's so great that you have so much produce you can donate.
Yeah.
Great. Cool. Great.
I was wondering, do we have a part in Hive where we collect all the information, like a list of books, list of activities for kids? Because I haven't found it so far.
Yes. Yes, that's a great question. We do. There's a Google Drive where we have like a list of resources. I created one for books, for websites, for games, for different resources and stuff. So I'll post the link in Hive again.
Yeah, please. Thank
so
you.
maybe you can help me make it like a spotlight type thingy majiggy in Hive, so it's always there.
Okay.
And then we'll also we might actually start moving that into the Mirror. Is that how you pronounce it? The Mirror website thing, and just post it there, because then you can like post the book covers as well, and it's just a little bit more visually appealing than a
Okay, thank you.
list on Google. Right. Okay. Good. So I will continue then. Thank you everyone for your comments. I'm just okay. Let's see. Okay. So I wanted to now move over to Montessori and the history album and the photography albums, the manuals, the like teaching folders. So I think I need to get my brain on to the switch, but I hope you guys can follow me. It's a bit of a quick switch, and I'm conscious of the time. So if I don't finish in today's session, then I will definitely continue in the first session of next year. And yeah, so for those who don't know, I am doing the Montessori teacher training, and the pedagogy for 6 to 12-year-olds is called Cosmic Education. And I was also working at a Montessori school in Oregon, and that's where for 5 years, and that's where I created an edible permaculture school garden. And so I also created a curriculum, like a Montessori permaculture curriculum, because there are a lot of parallels between Montessori and permaculture. Cosmic education is the idea that the curriculum and the teaching space supports the child in understanding the vastness of the universe and then their place in it. Montessori firmly advocated for the idea that each living being comes into this world with a unique task that connects them to the whole. And she really brought in the interconnectedness of all people and all beings into her teachings, and the way that she Montessori teachers are often called storytellers because the way that the teaching, the approach to it is really about telling stories. And yeah, there's 5 great stories, which you can see here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's in the middle of the circle. So it's the story of the universe, basically the Big Bang, the coming of life, so how plants and animals came onto the planet, the coming of humans. It doesn't say there's next 2, but the coming of language, and then the coming of maths and numbers, right? So these are the things that shaped humanity and allowed life to appear on Earth. And Montessori is really all about celebrating cultures and countries and the human, like us as humans. And I think that's just like a really powerful contrast to how, you know, the mainstream society puts profit over people, right? And that we're all being told that we're destroying the planet. And I'm just really appreciating the aspect of Montessori that really just celebrates humans, and that we have the special gift of the hand, the head, and the heart to help us, you know, to allow us to have survived over thousands of years and to create the things that we create. And, you know, unfortunately, we've moved into this very tech heavy world, and I don't want to talk too long about that, but it's just like, I think that permaculture and Montessori just like kind of give hope and allow us to tell a different story again, a story of integration and interconnectedness and connection with nature. So yeah, I just really value that, and that's kind of what I'd like to share with you guys today. Jal, I see that you have your hand raised. Should I pause? Or is that from earlier? No? Okay, I will just continue then. Okay. Yeah, so Montessori's holistic method offers concrete ways of experiencing the natural world, showing respect, adopting peaceful practices, and developing personal responsibility for contributing to the world, which actually are great ways to describe permaculture too, I think. And the classroom or the teaching experience does this practically through outdoor spaces and botany and biology lessons. The classroom culture is one of cooperation and collaboration and kindness. Another word for Montessori is actually also peace education. So adopting peaceful practices in the classroom. How do we speak to people with kindness, and showing respect for the classroom and for each other as well, and the materials. And then also learning about history and culture. So basically the idea of learning about the people that came before them, and then how the children will be able to shape the world that they live in after learning what they do in the classroom and in nature, of course. Oops. Good. Yeah, this quote, I think I mentioned it already, but I think it's just really powerful. So it's a quote from Newton originally, but it's just the idea that we all stand on the shoulders of the giants that came before us. And, you know, I just mentioned the like unsung heroes. So I just think it's really, yeah, it just kind of puts a different perspective on things, to like really appreciate who came before us and who helped shape the world that we live in now, right? And an appreciation of different cultures and practices and traditions. This is my favorite quote for so many levels. I think it's really just beautiful for Montessori, and also just really conveys what permaculture sets out to do. So to teach details is to bring confusion. To teach the relationship between things is to bring knowledge. And permaculture is all about creating relationships in the garden, creating relationships with things on your land, with chickens and the fruit trees and the compost, creating relationships with people in your family, within your community. Like everything we do is a relationship to something else. And what is the best way to treat that relationship with respect and kindness and gratitude? And yeah, in this aspect, it's like kind of like the piece that I was saying about earlier with the nature aspect. Like if you go into the forest and just reel out a bunch of facts, like the kids are going to be bored stiff. But if you like explain to them like why the tree is doing this and what your experiences with the tree and why the leaves fall, and kind of create a story around it and the relationship between the child and the tree, then that's going to just be much more impactful and have a lasting impact and form part of their knowledge. So yeah, this is the main way that I see that Montessori and permaculture are very similar. So Montessori asked the question, how have humans met their needs across civilizations, and how do place, culture, and climate affect how we meet those needs? Right, and the study of Montessori is through cultural geography, physical geography, history of cultures and different civilizations. And then permaculture for me kind of answers that question. So this is like my definition of permaculture. It's a design science modeled on the patterns of nature to create regenerative human settlements. So right, like how do humans meet their needs? And permaculture offers ways for humans to meet their needs in a regenerative way that doesn't cause harm to Mother Nature, but also really takes Mother Nature into consideration and learns from Mother Nature. Both are holistic and system thinking, so really focused on the interconnectedness of things and how things fit together and form part of the whole. And yeah, they're both very focused on culture, right? Of course, like permaculture is a portmanteau of permanent and agriculture. So how humans interact with each other, what a group of people have in common in regards to their behavior and how they think and act, and yeah, how we interact with each other, how we interact with our environment, with our space, how the climate impacts, how our culture impacts us, and how we can positively impact those things, right, and have a relationship of reciprocity. So like I said earlier, there's those 5 great stories from Montessori, and I really wanted to share the story, but it's quite long, so it would have been like half an hour to read the whole story, and I just took different parts of the story, but I'm just noticing that we don't have time, so I would love to start next year with the story. I hope that's all right with everyone. But the idea is that it tells the story of how humans came on this planet and how the early humans, you know, like as in the primitive times, they lived in caves or they were hunter and gatherers. And then over the thousands of years, like how humans have met their needs, and the needs are food, clothing, shelter, transportation, defense, medicine, art, and religion. And those are the fundamental needs of humans that are presented in a Montessori classroom. And I believe that permaculture is a way of meeting those needs and answering those questions. So I'd love to share that with you guys at the beginning of next year, if that's all right, that story. And then I would love to see us kind of weave permaculture practices and principles into that story, if you guys are willing to do that with me. Yeah, so this is another chart. It's just the list that I read out a second ago, just with diagrams and pictures for the children to make it more visually appealing. And then, yeah, it'd be kind of great to do a permaculture overlay of this. Like, how does permaculture meet the need for fruits and vegetables and culture and shelter, right? You can talk about all the different types of natural material in the like different methods of cob building and the different methods of building shelter according to climate and country and culture. So yeah, I'd love to see us create some sort of a permaculture overlay, and I'll talk about in a minute about what the plans are for next year as well. These are just the history materials. So Montessori works very so the materials in a Montessori classroom are kind of like key to the teaching, and the nomenclature cards are like they introduce a new concept or a new word, and then it's matched with a picture and a definition. So these are just like the needs list from earlier, and then the periods. So like, how did the primitive people meet their needs on the left? How the Egyptians meet their needs? And so these cards up here are examples of that. And each period has one card for each need, right? I just copied a few so that you can see it. So here at the beginning, they hunted animals. Then it's like using natural materials and flaxseed and to make linen. And then how did they used like bricks and mud to build the houses. Right here it says sun-dried mud bricks. So kind of using the materials on hand, the natural materials on hand, and how that's evolved over time, and how now most of the houses aren't made out of natural materials at all, right? So how do we find a middle ground on that? And then this is something like, this is the coming of life story. So the story that comes before the coming of humans, which I can also share one time, because it actually ties in really nicely to the forest education aspect. Like moss was basically the first plant on the planet, like it crept out of the sea. And then the reason why soil exists is actually because of ferns, because they decomposed. So those are really cool, lots of cool facts. And then moving from like the trilobites to the bigger fish, and then over to bigger mammals and things, and then of course to the humans. So that's a really cool chart that we use in Montessori, and also it just describes how life took form and how the planet created conditions that made it hospitable for human life. And it's just, again, this concept of like, how vast is the universe and how amazing it is that we're actually here, right? And I love to convey that to children, and I love that Montessori puts a focus on that. Okay, so this is kind of my plan for next year. I'm sorry that this session might be a little bit rushed, I guess. It's funny because you never know how long everything's going to take. I thought this, but yeah. Okay, so next year I would like to talk to you about the Wheel of Life, which is something that I learned from Warren Brush. He's a permaculture teacher in Southern California, and I highly recommend you check him out. He's a really incredible teacher and a really profound storyteller. And I won't go into too much detail, but basically today I will talk about it more in January. But basically this uses the cardinal directions to kind of determine the flow of the day and when to teach what, and how to use the energy of the day and the energy of your students to match the activity, right? So after lunch, you're not going to sit in a lecture room because the energy is going to be very low, right? So you'll do maybe a movement game, and then you have a reflection round at the end, and where's the part where you focus? That's probably in the morning, those kind of things. So that's just a quick introduction, but it's linked to the energy of the day, the cardinal directions, and it also links to the flow learning that I talked about earlier from Joseph Connell. So it's also linked to wilderness survival too. Warren Brush took a wilderness survival course with, gosh, I can't remember his name now. Oh, Tom Brown Jr. in New Jersey. And I wonder, Greg, if you're familiar with him. I can answer that question in a minute. Okay. And then the Earthkeepers camps, as some of you know, I host camps for children and permaculture camps that are generally a week long. So I'd love to share my lessons and schedule and the rhythm of that too. And then these are things that I can bring in, and then I would love us to make this as collaborative as possible. So I think the next step of this series is to really focus in on permaculture practices and teachings and principles, and how do we make them accessible to children. So basically my dream is to kind of create like I don't want to use like a PDC for children, right? So all the things that you've learned in Morek's PDC course, like when you read it, it's written for an adult, right? I mean, I know some children have taken the course, which is remarkable and amazing, but I think there's also ways to make it more child friendly with games and with materials and with song or movement or music and those kind of things, and posters. So I would love to see us take one of these topics each week and basically just find ways on like how I've taught them, then maybe how you've taught them, and then have a open discussion around how we could create more materials or more methods to teach these topics. And then the full finalized list of these topics will come in January. And yeah, please message me with ideas or topics you'd like to work on. And I'll read what the bottom says. Yeah, and I'll also create a Google Doc where we can add this, and I'll post something in Hive as well. Yeah, this is kind of what I already just said, but basically we'll pick a topic, I'll share what I've done, you can share what you've done, so really collaborative sharing aspect, and then we can create techniques together. And yeah, this is my dream for the end result, is to kind of create a manual of permaculture teaching materials. So we could create, like, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with the permaculture tree, I mean the principal tree that I made a few weeks ago. So like we could create a material around that, and then those fruits that I was talking about, like the yields of each, if you put a principle into practice, what are the yields that you might get? And we could create like apples and write the yields on those apples, and you know, we could create a let me go back, we could create just an illustration of a hugelkultur, or we could do something about composting, or we can do activities on zones, like the children can zone their bedroom, and then they zone their house, and then they can zone a fantasy world, right? So those kind of things. And then natural buildings, so excited about teaching children about natural building. Children just natural builders, so yeah. And then games and songs and best practices, right? So like sharing what's worked, what's not worked. You know, we will learn from our mistakes, we should forget that. And yeah, just sharing that. We don't have very much time, so I'll just go over this. This is just what I shared at the beginning of the sessions in the beginning of October. Just as a reminder, you can review this if you like, just our intention, I think. So relationship with that, which sustains us, understanding the natural processes around us, and then taking responsibility, right, and environmental stewardship. And then these three things: awareness and gratitude of nature and place what nature provides us with, identification and understanding what we name, we build a relationship to, and stewardship and action, what we love and we protect. Okay, I have another slide, but I'm going to share it for January. It's about a guild and creating a story around a guild. It's kind of been a dream of mine, so I will share this in January, and then we'll see if anybody wants to help out with creating story around a guild. Okay, I will stop, and thank you all so much for being here. I'm sorry we went so close to time, but I would love for you guys to share things if you would like to, and I'll do a quick skim over the messages.
I'm totally pumped up. I'm so excited. Everything sounds so good, so creative, so much fun. I'm really looking forward to doing all that stuff. And it's really coming in handy for me, since I may have this project in our school. So yeah, count me in with everything.
Great. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you. And it'd be great to collaborate with you in German eventually. I will message you. Yeah, and then it would be really cool to work on different languages eventually. But one step at a time, we all know that. Slow and steady solutions. I really like that comment from Fred. There are many wisdom sayings such as riddles, proverbs, and stories that can be retrieved from elders, cultural and religious leaders for preservation. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we have the translator group, exactly. Yeah, so Jana, you've asked me about the pattern. So yes, so next year I will be hosting 2 sessions a month, and then 1 session will be with a guest speaker. So probably be me, guest speaker, then me again, and not just me, but us, right? So like the collaborative process. And we have some cool guest speakers lined up for next year. Morag and I are working on that. Yeah, maybe I could just get a quick feedback or response or raise of hand if you guys are okay with the direction that I just suggested for this group. Yes, great, good. Good. Yeah, and this is us.
Sorry,
Hello.
I have a question. When does it start again? That's the bit I'm confused.
That's a great question. Like, I don't know, but I think the 14th of January, maybe a week earlier. I'm not sure. I will. Morag has the date set, but we're just.
Yeah, no,
And I think it will be the same time, same day, so same as today. Just once the daylight saving changes here in Europe, I don't know about Australia. It will go to, I don't know, something will happen about the hours in March, but that's a while away.
I live in Queensland. We don't believe in daylight saving.
I wish we didn't either.
Neither do we, but still done. So
I know. Arizona is the only state in the whole of the US that just doesn't do it. They're just like, nah, we're not changing the clocks. I think it's really funny. It's like all other 49 states do it, but Arizona's like, nope, staying where we are.
Yeah, I think Chrissy had a hand up. Did you want to say anything?
Yes.
Yeah.
Please, thank you. Thanks for noticing that.
Mute. Hey, I just wanted to say thanks, Ange. This has been so fun. I love how it's all coming together and it's exciting. And my head is so full of so many ideas, but they're like swimming or like butterflies or bees buzzing around. And I'm just like, I'm at the stage where I'm like, there's so much there. So I'm sort of like over the Christmas period, I think I'll just draw pictures and let it come out and yeah, and just keep exploring it like that. But I'm excited. I've got so many, it's a mind map in there.
That's great.
But I love that Montessori.
Yeah.
That's really exciting, and tying that in with permaculture. But that's enough. I won't go on.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Yeah. If you guys have ideas that are bubbling up inside, please write them down, and please find a way to share them with me and with everyone, because that's what we're trying to create here. And even if it's a tiny idea or it feels like a silly idea, maybe somebody will match it with something else, or it can be like a seed that will sprout into something. So please share, and I'll create in the mirror. I will create like a section for today. Maybe I'll write something about Montessori and about forest education and do a few bubbles, and then you can add as you want. But please add. Yes, please add your ideas. And yeah. And then Fred, I'd love to talk to you about those things from the proverbs and things from different cultures. I think that's a really beautiful aspect. And if anybody has any from their own culture or from cultures that they've traveled to, I think that would be really great.
do you know about Wolf-Dieter Stoll? He's ethnobiologic, and he's a shaman and specialized in knowing stories about plants from different cultures. So it's not around here. I think he's from Austria, but he's been in the US for a long time. He's been to India. So he knows a lot about stories about plants, like the elderberry bush and what it means, or what the significance was, and all the stories. And I'm planning on, with all the, like Chrissy, all the other plans I have, on getting those stories, somehow collect them, because I think it's very important for the kids to know stories, to be able to connect with the different plants and all the surroundings.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Definitely. It'll be, maybe we can create like a section where we can have like a plant resource section, like the benefits of certain plants, or like the history of a plant or something, and you can just bring that in while you're in the forest with the kids or in nature and stuff. Yeah, just fun facts. Like I know we're going over time, but just one last fact and then we can end. And Julie, please, you can speak after me. So you know, on a corn cob, you know, the hairs that stick out, each hair needs to be pollinated to create one kernel. I don't know if you guys knew that, but I think that's a really exciting fact. So like things like that, little fun facts for kids. Julie, go ahead.
Hi there. I just wanted to share a book that I used with my son. We homeschool and we used it for about a year, and it's amazing for kids. It's a lot about each herb, and they have beautiful folk stories and songs that go with each one in different ways they can make them. So I don't know if anyone can see that one.
What does it say?
It's called a kid's herb book for children of all ages. But it's got great stories, old folk stories about each of the plants and the herbs.
Great,
and the children can work through the book, or you can use them when you're outside and getting to know that herb or that plant. And so it has some great stories in there too.
Great, thank you. Do you mind telling me the title? I mean the author, sorry, so that I can just post it now.
Yes, Leslie Tierra, T-I-E-R-R-A.
T-I-E.
And it T-I-E-R-R-A.
Yeah.
And they run I think it's called the East West School of Herbal Medicine. So the kids can also go online at the end, and there are some links if they want to for extra herbal things, and they can get themselves a little certificate and herbal cards they can print out to have and play with and help identify. So yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah, great, thank you. Let's do a herbal session as well. I love that. Great. Okay, thank you, Julie. Thank you. Okay, thank you everyone so much for being here. Great session, great last session. Super excited for next year. And yeah, please email me with any ideas and inspirations and thoughts. And yes, I understand. I'm constantly buying books, Daniela. It's like my Christmas wish list is books. Yeah. Okay. So thank you all again so much for being here. Super excited. And yeah, Merry Christmas to everyone, to all of you who celebrate it.